go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's program, The Social Scene, Coaching Your Teens and Tweens to Make Positive Decisions. I'm Sarah McCarty, the Thriving Youth Program Director at the Community Fund of Darien. I coordinate the efforts of Thriving Youth Darien and our Drug-Free Communities grant from the CDC aimed at addressing teen alcohol and marijuana use and prevention in Darien. Thriving Youth Darien is a volunteer coalition convened by the Community Fund of Darien that brings together leaders from our local community organizations to promote and empower positive youth development and mental health with the goal of reducing teen substance use. The diverse group includes mental health, substance use, and healthcare professionals, as well as leaders from the schools, police, town government, and clergy. In partnership with Darien Public Schools, last year, Thriving Youth surveyed nearly 2,000 Darien 6th through 12th grade students, your children, your friends' children, and your neighbors, about their mental health and substance use patterns. Their responses showed us areas of greatest concern and help us and other local youth-focused organizations create educational programming for parents like this one. Some key findings related to youth drinking and partying included the top 3 places that teens are drinking, at parties, with friends in a home, and to a lesser extent, at home with a parent present. It also showed significant increases in alcohol use from 8th to 9th grade as students enter high school, and again from 11th to 12th grade. And among teens who are drinking, to have fun was the top reason. So how can we help our kids make healthy decisions about the social party scene and best talk with them about the potential risks and consequences of substance use? We are pleased to welcome our 2 local experts who will help us to help them navigate the social scene, Joyce Sixsmith and John Hamilton. To start this evening, Susannah Lewis, Thriving Youth Darien's co-chair, will introduce our speakers and get the conversation started. Then we will have an audience Q&A. Please submit your questions for John and Joyce using the direct chat button at the bottom of your screen. All questions will be asked anonymously. A final housekeeping note, this event will be recorded, and we plan to make the recording available on the Thriving Youth Darien resource page. We'll send all this information in the email once the video is processed. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Susannah.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Susannah Lewis. I'm the Director of Community Relations at Silver Hill Hospital, and as Sarah mentioned, the co-chair of Thriving Youth Darien. So thank you to everyone for being here tonight, and Joyce and John for being with us to share your expertise. And I'm very pleased now to introduce both a little bit more formally. Joyce Sixsmith is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor with 42 years of experience. She is the Connections Counselor at Darien High School, specializing in substance misuse counseling and prevention, and is advisor for the Blue Wave Council, a group of DHS students who are committed to being substance-free and making healthy decisions. Her work at DHS also involves creating educational forums for students and parents alike, and she is often a guest in the health classes. Joyce is also the founder and president of the RAM Council Foundation, a nonprofit for teens and other communities who commit to substance-free living and focus on healthy decision-making. She speaks on a variety of topics for schools, faith communities, and various agencies. John Hamilton is the president and CEO of Liberation Programs. He brings 3 decades of experience to his role and is nationally recognized as an expert in the field of addiction treatment and prevention. He chairs the advisory board for the Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and serves on the Governor's Alcohol and Drug Policy Council. John is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. So without further ado, why don't we start with the questions, get right to it. And we'll start with one about communication. And Joyce and John, I think, you both have a lot of wonderful wisdom to share, I think, on all of these questions, all in for no particular reason, I'll direct one to one and one to the other, but I hope both of you will feel free to chime in. So Joyce, if you want to kick it off.
Okay.
During adolescence, parents are trying to strike a hard balance between giving their tween or teen the independence they're seeking while continuing to help steer them toward healthy, positive decisions that will serve them well now and in the future. What can parents do to keep an open dialogue with their teens and not push them away while remaining effective leaders and, when necessary, boundary setters for them?
Great question. So thank you for having me tonight. Yay, DHS, go Blue Wave. I do want to say that I'm a big parent advocate, always rooting for parents. And I will use the word teens, but of course it applies to tweens as well. It is definitely a balancing act for parents. Teens need to begin practicing to be independent at home. I encourage parents to give their kids the proper physical and emotional space to do so. It is my opinion that kids need, teenagers and tweens, need their parents and caregivers to steer them toward healthy decision-making. They need your guidance, your clear messages, especially when it comes to underage drinking and other substance use, consequences in the social scene. So open dialogue is a must. But before we can have open dialogue, there needs to be a relationship between parent and teen, one that's solid, one that's approachable and dependable. A relationship needs to be in place. So what I would just ask parents to do a quick check-in to see how they're doing with their teenagers. I know John so often says to check in with your teenagers, to even ask them how you're doing. Ask yourself, am I connected to my teen? Am I connected to each one of them? How is my tone at home with my teen? Am I listening to their feelings and affirming them, even if I might disagree with what they're sharing? Am I meeting them where they're at? That's another big thing John is always talking about. Am I meeting their needs? Teens need to be able to turn to their parents when they are overwhelmed, unsure, a little anxious, or just plain tired. They also need to share their daily events, their triumphs, and their joys. They certainly need to ask questions because they're trying to just figure it all out. If your relationship with your teen is in place, fantastic. Keep it going. And if it's not, wonderful. We'll reset and rebuild. I suggest that parents try often to have open dialogue with their kids and making sure it's a time that the kids can receive it. Let it be a safe place that the kids can then turn to you and tap you on the shoulder for support. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. John, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I agree with everything that Joyce said. I would add to that to have one of the greatest strengths that parents can have is to have humility, to have a recognition that they have no idea what it is like today in 2024 to be an 8th grader or 10th grader at Darien High School. And they need to have a lens like my glasses, change their lens and put on a lens of not knowing, to listen to their kids, to try to understand their world, to take them seriously, to affirm them, as Joyce said. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but validate their experience. And validation does not mean agreement, but it means that you have that kind of humble lens of like, I have no idea what goes on in your school, what's going on in your skin, what's going on in your head with your emotions, and what type of stress are you dealing with today that probably looks very different than the stress that we were under when we were kids. So if you lead with that sense of, real honest and authentic vulnerability and powerlessness and humility, that you really earnestly want to know about, the good, the bad, and the ugly in their life, it'll open up communication.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And John, moving along to a next question, what techniques can parents give their kids to use in a social situation that becomes uncomfortable for them, whether around substance use or for some other reason?
That's a great question. It's always good to strike when the iron's cold and have these techniques, really in their phone, perhaps even in notes, just in case they are totally like freezing in a high stress situation, have these discussions beforehand. Have discussions on what would be an appropriate refusal skill that doesn't have the kids lose faith if they're in a tough situation or lose some faith, and have the ability to say something that they can gracefully bow out of a tough situation. I always talk about having an escape plan where the parent will tell the kid before they go to a party or in any type of stressful situation, listen, it could be 2 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, doesn't matter. Text me and I will pull you out of that situation. And they can say gracefully that, emergency came up, someone had got into an accident, grandma had a heart attack, whatever it is, to gracefully leave that situation. And again, when they get into the car and you pick them up, all you want to say in response to their text is thank you for calling, and follow their lead if they need to talk about it. But don't ask 20 questions or grill them for who is putting them in this uncomfortable situation and what happened, because it's likely to have them shut down and not be able to be in a position where they could actually call on you next time. But I think it's going to vary and be tailored on the strength of your relationship and the level of disclosure each of your kids feel comfortable with you. So, again, in real life situations that are stressful, whether it's substance use, misuse or not, for a kid, if they have the ability to call you in real time, process things, identify the feeling, maybe even take some notes just so they can process it later, kind of get a reset, be reflective, take a pause so they aren't reactive, but they can actually take a pause and reflect on what they should do, what they want to do next. What are they feeling? How can they get out of this situation? Who can they reach out to for help? And have that ability to actually build on that sense of resiliency that they have, solution focused experiences in the past that have worked, problem solving skills, safe people in their life they can go to, whether it's friends or family, that they can actually text in a real situation if it is hard to get out of it, to process what's going on. And if they can't get out of it, they're still being able to identify the feeling, what's going on, what's made them so uncomfortable, and then they could talk to someone about that. Another safe adult, it might be a parent, it could be a counselor later, could be a friend, but they can process that later so they can learn from it.
Wonderful. Joyce, would you add anything to that?
That was perfect. The only other thing I would just say is that all along, I loved what John said. All along, I would be coaching them to be confident and comfortable in saying no to whatever it is. You can do this. You got this. I love you. I believe in you. And even having them practice asking a teacher for extra help, calling for a pizza, all those things that they have to just kind of gaining practice in independence and standing tall for themselves. Great job, John.
Joyce?
And what would you, just as a follow-up to that, sort of in the next day, the following day after that happens, because I imagine a lot of parents will be sitting on their hands when you say, don't ask, don't grill your kids about what the situation was, but a parent is necessarily going to want to make sure that they're okay and just have that instinct. Do you say to parents, the next day, follow up, see how they're doing, or do you really just leave it alone and let them bring it to you?
I think it's worth checking in, but I think my mantra generally with parents is follow their lead, and check in with them to say, yesterday, I appreciate you calling. Is it something you want to talk about today? Is anything I can help you with? Is it, and then just check in with them to see what kind of response you get. I mean, and if they really want to open up, then you can get into some real problem solving of like, okay, what was the activating event in a sense, and what was the, kind of belief system in their head that got them so stressed out? And, it usually has to do with some sense of safety or their sense of being viewed by others in a certain way. And what was the consequence of them leaving? And because there's consequences to all behavior. Do they feel like, they burn bridges with friends? Are they going to be able to mend it? Is there, something that they're going to avoid in the future? Is it going to be unavoidable? And what can they do instead? And so you can be in a place where they can recognize that, there is some opportunity for learning after, if they're interested. But for the most part, you just want to make sure they're safe. So as long as you got them home safe, that's what you want to build on. And again, if they text you, you may not have to address it. And the parents are like, well, why wouldn't I have to address it? Because it may not happen again. If the kid's texting you 2 o'clock in the morning every night for 3 nights in a row or every weekend, now it starts to really call for a different conversation of saying, I'm not thinking that there's been learning experiences here from what's been going on. So I could be wrong, let's, prove me wrong, because that'll be, kind of grist for the mill for like giving you an understanding of, was this an anomaly? Was this a, very unusual situation? Or has this now become a pattern that's continually going to cause this kid stress every weekend?
Sure. Thank you. And Joyce, so what can parents do to feel more confident and capable during their teen parenting journey?
So parents, I always say parents need other parents, I think it's so important that they talk to friends, that they talk to people in their faith community, join groups. We have had some fantastic participation with dads. Remember, John, at the school, we
Yeah.
did a wonderful parent presentation through the wonderful Parent Association, and we had a bunch of dads show up. So parents need parents. Parents need to read and stay current on what's going on. Attending things like this at school and in the community, so important. I think parents need to focus on their self-care and make sure they're in balance so that they can give their all and their best foot forward to do this whole task of parenting. To make sure, they put the oxygen mask on themselves, to get their exercise in, to take their breaks, to eat well and care for themselves. I'm going to bring up a little sensitive thing. Sometimes parenting can bring up our own childhood. Sometimes it wasn't an easy walk for someone. And sometimes we tend to overcompensate for things we might not have had. But I think that's important to get in touch with that as a parent, to process it, to make peace with it, to maybe get help with it. If we might have had a difficult, angry household, we don't want to repeat that with our own kids. And if, for lots of different things. But I think that's so important. There are such good counselors out there. John and I can give you names. Our faith community leaders have great people, self-help reading, but let's not ignore it. Let's do something about it so that we can bring our A game and so that we can be free. Let me see if I have anything else of that. The important, let's see here, make sure I didn't forget anything. No, that's fine. That's it. I think that it's important, I'm sorry for the last one. I think it's important for Darien parents to know that they are their teachers, that they are their leaders, that they are their guides. And it's okay to draw boundaries and love your kids enough to want to protect them. We're not, as we always say, we're not their friends, we're their parents. So get support, be in touch with yourself, and feel strong enough and comfortable and confident. And it may not always be what all your peers are doing, but protect your kids. Hope that was helpful.
Great. John?
And again, I just want to echo what Joyce said about reaching out to other parents. I think the worst type of struggle that parents have is feeling alone and feeling like their issues with their kids are unique to Darien. And just being able to talk to other Darien parents and realize they're not alone, that, all the kids in the community to one degree or another went through stress during COVID, right? So there was a universal experience of stress and unknown and despair and some sense of hopelessness and confusion that people can relate to. And I think in some really important ways has destigmatized the ability to ask for help, the ability to be more authentic, the ability to be vulnerable, to talk about one's stress, one's anxiety, one's sadness, normalizing that in a way. So I think it is important to realize there's a community of healing out there in Darien. There's such great professionals, great faith communities. The schools are incredible. The resources are incredible. And the parents themselves, the other parents are such a resource. So I think that's really important. Again, another important piece is getting on the same page as your partner.
Yes.
You really have to recognize that you grew up, to Joyce's point, everybody grew up in a different family. If your family was a troubled family, you tend to want to have everything be different for your kids. If your family was a wonderful experience, you tend to want to replicate everything for your kids. In both cases, you're absolutely wrong and you're misguided because you're not paying attention to what's really important, to what, might have worked for you, has maybe no relevance is a little strong, but little relevance to what might, what's more important to what your kids need and what's going to work for them. And each of them, by the way, need different interventions, and each of your kids may need different things because they're unique human beings. Then the other part of that is you got a partner, depending on how they grew up. If they had a positive or negative experience, they might want to subtly or directly kind of instill their values growing up on their kids as well. Really, in some ways, doesn't really matter what you come up with. Just come up with some agreement. Get on the same page. Get in the same chapter, or at least the same book. Because I think that's what causes stress. I don't think, I know, because I talk to a lot of kids, as Joyce does too. Causes a lot of stress for kids, and it doesn't help where kids really need to grow and thrive by being in a kind of a safe space and a healing space, a safe space, and the community needs to be safe. And the first level of community is the family. So it disrupts the sense of the home being safe if mom stands for something and dad stands for something else. Decide what you stand for together. Be a united front. Always talk about the greatest gift a father can give to his children is to love their mother, and the greatest gift a mother can give to their children is to love their father. Why? That's where you learn peer love, intimacy between partners. Otherwise, kids are only going to learn parental love at the expense of being able to learn the skill of being able to love a peer. And if they believe their own flesh and blood can't be there for each other, how do they believe that some stranger is going to give and receive them, love for them someday, right? So that's really important. So you got parents out there on this, webinar tonight saying, well, I'm a single parent. What does that mean for me? What it means for you is get a life. Get a life outside your kids with other adults. Kids have two jobs: to receive love and learn. It is not their responsibility to make you happy. And that's important to recognize. So you really be able to give your kids the message that their world is safe and that there's a bright future for them, and they can have a partner of love or a life of joy by the way you live your life. So it's really important to sit down with your partner and be very clear. What are your values? What does your family stand for in a universal way? And do you live a life that reflects the values in which you want to instill in your kids? And be consistent. So you have to role model that sense of what's important to you and to your family. But the key is trying to get on the same page, and then you won't feel so alone. And then you'll have support even during those difficult times, during the teen years, where oftentimes the kid's job are just to is basically then individuate, separate, be autonomous, right? For adolescent development, if you're not on the same page, it's going to be really easy to personalize that and make it about you, and it's not about you. So don't personalize it, process it with your partner, and then you'll be able to become a kind of a strong, united front with rational authority, which means it's not tyrannical authority, which is irrational authority, which is when you get frustrated and say, well, you have to do that because I'm your father or I'm your mother. Where's the opportunity to learn and feel loved, right? Missed opportunity. Then it's just like a misuse of power. You're trying to influence your child, not have power over and control over them. So the key is every intervention you make with your kid should have a rationale. If you can't explain the reason and how that is directly related to their safety or their growth or what this family stands for, then maybe you need to revisit, how important that might be for you and your partner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Then going to a couple of questions sort of that are substance specific. We have so many resources in Darien for parents and students who are seeking education around the dangers of underage drinking. What one or two specific points would you advise that parents discuss with their kids regarding underage drinking and the social scene? Joyce, do you want to start?
Go first? Okay. So I promise I have 4, but I'll say them as quickly as 2. How about that? All right. Number 1, first of all, just the mere fact that parents do any kind of prevention is a win. Okay. Number 1, to teach them, to remind them to obey the law, to teach them what the laws are, not just about the drinking age, but about hosting parties and how that affects parents. The drinking and driving, I think we've done a nice job of that of late in the last few years, et cetera. But I'd like to see parents remind their kids not to get in the cars with anyone who's been drinking. And we never know, oh, well, they only had 1 beer. They're fine. We don't know what kind of pre-gaming they might have done prior to the event. But just, we don't get in the car with anyone who's drank anything. What you post on social media matters in terms of being around alcohol, red Solo cups, other substances, paraphernalia. And the last but not least, the genetic predisposition. It's my specialty is families and addiction. So important. If we don't want to share that it might be grandma or grandpa or uncle, aunt, or yourself or whoever it is, can we just say that it is in the family and you just need to be a little bit more aware, a little more careful? That it's just so important that our kids know that. So, and I just think having those and the resources in the school, everybody knows I exist. I'm there part-time, but my promise to Darien is I'm available 7 days, 24/7 with my cell phone. And we've got fantastic kids in crisis, a wonderful team of psychologists and social worker and guidance department. And then we've got great agencies like Liberation. Oh heavens, so many. So it's okay to come to us and it's okay to go outside. We can give you names. It's okay to do things in private, whatever works, but have those talks ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, your
Wow.
your one or two take-home messages for
I did
Yeah.
about
kids
17. I did
on
17.
underage drinking.
Yeah. Joyce hit most of the salient points. It's really hard to top that.
It's
Great
my
job.
thing. It's my baby.
Yeah, no, I know this is definitely your
My
wheelhouse,
world.
Joyce. And I always tell parents, and I think we even did this in like a public service announcement with Thriving Youth a couple of years ago, to push back the age of onset. We know too much about the brain development right now, and increased exposure increases risk. And so first of all, we need to know alcohol is a drug, and people need to. I think there's this kind of differentiation of alcohol and drugs, and alcohol is in some ways more toxic than pretty much any other drug to our society. Everybody talks about the fentanyl. I mean, the fentanyl epidemic is out of control. Over 100,000 people died last year. More people died in this country from fentanyl than from colon cancer and breast cancer combined, right? It was the equivalent of two jumbo jets or two, 757s crashing a day. Was how many lives we lost from the fentanyl overdoses. However, there is still more alcohol-related deaths last year than fentanyl overdoses. And it seems to be overshadowed because of all the fear people have, these new drugs on the scene, and the high THC and vaping, and the xylazine and the fentanyl and the benzodiazepines that are out there. But alcohol is still the real killer. So increased exposure increases risk at an early age, period. And the data is there. If the kid starts drinking at 14, they have a 40% chance of having a problem with alcohol in their lifetime. That's even without a genetic predisposition. And if you push from 14 to 16 and they have their first drink, then it cuts in half to 20%. From 16 to 18, it cuts in half again. And from 18 to 21, it cuts in half again. And by the age of 21, which is the legal age in all 50 states, if a person has their first drink, they only have a 7% chance of having a problem with alcohol in their lifetime. Why is it still 7%? Because the brain is still growing. The brain's still developing until they're 24 if you're a woman, 25 if you're a man, 40 for some guys. But there's a real sense, I know it's a slam on guys. Sorry, guys. You know who I'm talking to. So that's the message. And the other message is, my big thing about all substances is motive too. Is like, if kids are doing drugs to feel good and drinking to feel good, it's still dangerous, and one pill can kill, particularly with fentanyl. But we're probably not, if they're connecting with others and it's in a social scene, in a context, we're probably not going to see them unless they're doing heavy amounts, because that increased exposure to that amount of any substance is going to increase addiction. We're not going to see them in liberation programs. Who we see in liberation programs, that people might have started to feel good, but now they're using to feel better. And if kids out of the gate are drinking to, as Joyce said, to pre-game, if they're drinking alone, if they're drinking to mood regulate, big red flags.
So I have one more substance specific question after this, but this is a follow-up on this in terms of kids' motive for drinking. So we know that from our survey data that kids reported drinking to blow off steam and have a good time. What are some things that parents can do to sort of help their kids find and access those alternative sources too of fun and stress relief, so that they do also feel like they have sort of an arsenal of things that they can go to? It's not just the party on Saturday night that they're holding out for.
Joyce, you want to take that first?
Either of you.
Go first? Okay. I just think parents have the power to be such amazing role models. And our Darien parents are so fantastic. They're so present. They're so alive. They're so with us in every respect. I think that we've got to have parents show these kids how to exercise and do outdoor activities. Show them how reading and volunteerism and entertaining and socializing and celebrating the food and the beautiful people that you're having, instead of not just at the, of course, you're allowed to drink when you're an adult, but that the alcohol is not the center. Show them how to love life and enjoy and stress relieve, and get them to come with you in family occasions, on individual private time. Show them how you pursue your hobbies and your interests, and try to then focus on where are your kids now? Nurture what they love, their dance, their arts, their sports, their faith community, their clubs. Help them find something. I know some parents will say to me, but they don't want to do anything, Joyce, So we work hard, and I try to sell a drug-free life all day long, but I'm also trying to help the kid find something they love that they can hold on to. So those are my suggestions.
And maybe not then turning that thing into the perfect college application item.
Right. Let me, I forgot what I was going to say. You go, John, and I'll remember. Oh, that kids need dreams, and kids need things to aspire to be. Some kids know what they kind of want to do. Some kids are very directed, other kids aren't. But just try to keep having them have something to direct their positive energy on. We've seen a culture shift. I'm proud to say that Blue Wave Council, there are a lot of kids in Darien that don't drink, that don't want to drink. They just need to be with other like-minded peers and have other opportunities, and have other parents going, yes, go for it. We've got this together. So go, John.
It's very, very well put there, Joyce. It's everything what I was going to say. Basically, kids need to find their tribe. They need to find their community. As they say, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. They need to find connections, true connections, connections to their feelings, connections to their family, connections to their community, connections to all activities that they're passionate about. They find their bliss, find their passion, and parents try not to qualify, or judge what your kids are excited about. See it as a learning opportunity for you. What is it about whatever they're doing that gives them joy, that gives them confidence, that gives them connection, and find other ways they can do that. And again, as Joyce said, it's like lead by example. Experience joy in your own life. Show them, how to have fun. Host parties. Not all parties with alcohol. Certainly you can host parties with alcohol, but not every gathering with other adults needs to include alcohol. It's kind of a mixed message you're giving if you're trying to have them look at other activities. And then also, what role alcohol has in your life. If you're, after a stressful day, if you come home and, pour a drink, it's quite a significant message you're giving your kid. And try to show your kids that there are other ways to reduce stress, as Joyce said: exercise, go for a walk, talk to your partner, process things, get goofy and silly. That vulnerability allows them to put their guard down as well, and just kind of role model a life of, humanness, and a life of joy, and just being able to really try to have some fun with them as well. As Joyce said, try to connect them into, if they need a jump start to connect to community, remember that the first community is the family. Find ways in which to engage them, and have them be able to have joyful experiences with family members.
Great. Okay. So then my second substance specific question, similarly to alcohol, we have a rapidly developing network of resources for parents and students who are looking for education around the dangers associated with marijuana and THC, and particularly now with legalization. So same question on marijuana and THC. What are the one or two specific points that you think parents should talk to their kids about?
John, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that, again, this is where the humility comes in. Parents who may have lived through the 60s, 70s, 80s, whenever their decade was, this is not your marijuana. The level of THC is not regulated, even in the gummy bears and the vaping. and it's quite dangerous. I mean, Colorado was one of the first states to legalize uh, marijuana, and now they actually have state regulations to restrict the quantity of THC to 30% because it's just so toxic beyond that. With all this dabbing and all, I mean, it can create, like, we're seeing kids actually having, and now there's some research that kids with smoking this level of THC have psychotic-like symptoms or bipolar symptoms, and they can manifest with like psychiatric illness, show up in emergency departments, and they look like they're having a full-blown psychiatric episode, and it's because of some of the potency in THC. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not, the difficult thing here in messaging is that we know scared straight doesn't work. Scared straight was this railway prison. And, every one of those kids, by the way, that got yelled at by prisoners ended up in jail. Why? Because they didn't do anything about their social determinants. They went back to the lives of stress and trauma that they came from, right? So that wasn't going to change things. So you don't want to send, you want to send messages that are accurate. I mean, there's science here. But the trouble is, this country has not done its due diligence and research on the long-term effects. Kind of, we put the cart before the horse here because there hasn't been any longitudinal studies in the United States. We can rely on a study from New Zealand. It was the only longitudinal study that shows it reduces likelihood, chronic use of graduating college, and reduction in intelligence. And that was with 4% THC. But now it's average 15 to 30 to 50% THC. We have no understanding of what that long-term exposure is going to have to the brain. But we do know even the short-term exposure to this high level of THC can create some pretty scary experiences with kids. So again, it's the difficult thing is if it doesn't match their experience, they can dismiss it. So we have to send messages that don't insult kids' intelligence or their experience. But the truth is that we have a lot of unknowns. So you come from a place of humility and you want to check in with your kids of what is their understanding and experience of what's going on with these levels of THC and vapes. Have they seen or heard horror stories? Has it changed and influenced the way they look at these substances?
Anything that you'd like to add, Joyce?
John covered everything. I was going to bring up the bad reactions, the psychotic piece, and that we never know if it's going to be laced with something, and, in my 17 other reasons for the alcohol, are obviously the brain, the body, and their judgment, and it's a gateway drug. We know it's a gateway for, other things possibly. So John did a great job with it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Before we open up to audience Q&A, are there any other pieces of guidance topically that either one of you would like to throw in for parents that we have? Yes, John.
I just want to dovetail off of Joyce and the gateway. I want to emphasize for parents that the true gateway is toxic stress and trauma. Kids that are under toxic stress and can't regulate stress, that is the gateway for an unhealthy relationship with substances. So as a parent, you want to look at, are you a stressor for your kids or do you offer stress relief? And that's where you have to check in with them. What am I, how am I doing? What am I doing well? What am I doing poorly? What can I do different? Am I giving you the message that I believe in you and have faith in you? Again, it's not about trusting kids because their jobs are to individuate, separate, and kind of do their own thing. So don't take it personally. Have faith they're making the best choices available to them with their world and in their skin and their choices and their emotions that they can, and you hope that they can learn from that. But you want to see what is it you can do for your kids to show support and take some of the stress, off their plate, because that is a pretty consistent message that I hear from Darien kids. They feel a lot of stress. They feel stress just from their parents' success. Parents in Darien have done a pretty good job of really, making wonderful, lives and careers for themselves, but they don't realize they don't have to tell their kids, they have to do the same. But just the fact that they did that becomes something that kids are aware of, and they feel like that if they'll disappoint their parents if they don't have that same level of success. A tremendous amount of stress some of these kids feel, or feeling like they're always going to disappoint their parents if they don't go to an Ivy League school, or if they don't become a CEO, or if they don't do this and that. And you want to check in of are they, where are they? Are you comfortable with being able to have these uncomfortable conversations with kids to really ask them what their dreams and needs are, even if they're very different than yours or your thoughts, what you think they should be doing. And, again, it goes back to meeting your kids where they're at and love them for who they are, not for who you want them to be, and otherwise it's not, it's giving them that added stress that they're always going to disappoint you.
Great. Thank you. Any added bonus wisdom from you, Joyce?
1 or 2 lines, I'll be good because I feel like I said a lot. Just that I never met a parent that regretted doing prevention, right? And I'll never forget a story when somebody got in trouble for vaping and a dad ripped apart the room and the kid was like, "He ripped apart my room." And I thought, and I said in the family session, thank heavens that you had a daddy that cared enough and loved you enough to rip apart your room. In other words, that he was worried and that he cared. Now, whether, ripping apart the room is the right thing, but meaning that he was present and that he was trying to figure out what was going on. So I would just so encourage parents to do the best they can, which they are doing the best they can, have prevention talks, be emotionally and physically around, try to get your kids into something they love. So many great things at our school. They can start a club if they don't have something that they enjoy, get something outside of school, and to try to encourage having them have a few different sets of friends. So that if one peer group kind of is going in a direction that might not be the same values or making the best positive decisions, kids have other choices. So thank you.
Great. So we're going to open it up now for Q&A, and you can put your questions in the chat, and I can see all of those, and we'll do my best to get through them and not skip any. We have one that is already there, and I think this, I have a hunch that this dovetails off of your response, John, about toxic stress, but there may be more to add. How does a high-pressured community such as Darien, Westport, etc., affect substance use in teens? Either one of you.
Yeah, again, this goes back to Joyce's community. Lived in
Westport.
Westport years ago. I'll always remember this had like a profound effect on me, that we did these focus groups with kids because parents were worried they were under so much stress. This was in Westport, so very similar community. And at the end of the day, after we talked to all these kids, the kids did identify that they were feeling a lot of stress. And they thought it was the stress from the schools and the stress from friends. Their greatest stressor was their parents, and I thought that was so sad that the parents who wanted us to go in and find out how can this community reduce the stress was the problem. And but then once that was exposed, now they had the opportunity to be the solution. So I say that because I think the Darien community is made up of all these parents on this call that can actually start a movement in a way that allows for changing the culture to allow kids to be human, to lead by example, show vulnerability, try to really go out of your way to not have this like level of competitiveness, have to just add the stress to your kids where they really, you're not meeting them where they are. You're meeting them with your agenda. So the strategy is like, if you meet your kids where they are, you'll always walk away with new understanding, love, and compassion. If you walk away frustrated, that's your agenda. You think they should be somewhere else. You have an expectation of where you think they should be versus where they are. So if you approach each of your kids that way, then you'd be able to recognize the stress that you might impose on them in a direct way, and that you can then actually pull back and be different with them and reduce some of that stress and those expectations that are your agenda and not your kids.
I'll just have
Anything you want to add, Joyce?
one-liner. I'll just say what we find at school, what we hear a lot, is really the stress that these poor kids put on themselves, at the cafeteria table and comparing themselves with their grades and their goals and whether they made this team or that or whatever. So we're trying to really work hard individually with kids to help them put less pressure on themselves as well. And we have our wellness center, and we're trying to, encourage kids to take breaks and do a lot of good things at our school through advisory and things like that to lessen the stress in our school community.
I think also from just the conversations you have with other people's kids, be really aware of like how toxic, in a sense, sometimes the question of what sounds so benign is, so what colleges are you looking at? Right away, they think it's a scorecard that they're going to disappoint if they're not, prestige colleges. And or what are you going to do when you graduate high school? It's again the sense of, oh, I'm going to disappoint my parents because my parents' friends are asking me these questions and they're keeping a scorecard and their kids are going to this school and this school, and those are not schools that I'm going to get into. So, just be careful of like how sometimes so narrow and myopic the questions that parents ask their kids, about, how do they do in their exams, and how are they doing in school, or how are they doing in sports, and all things that are, inherently competitive, and try to have different conversations that doesn't look like a scorecard.
Great. So we have one more question here. Our child finds it stressful that we encourage her to limit her phone social media use and introduce balance into her day. I imagine a number of parents experience this. Suggestions?
Again, this is another opportunity where you can check with other parents to see what are the norms in the community, because your kids will say, my friends, let the unlimited access, and they always come up with, or no curfews, and I can use my devices 24/7, or they can use their devices 24/7. It might be good to check in with people that you believe kind of share the similar values than you, to see if that's like a little fact checking to see if it's true, just to feel like you're not alone. Or I think more importantly, that you're not being unreasonable, because sometimes some parents might be operating in a vacuum, and kids' social devices are their lifeline. So to go too extreme is it another way of causing kids a sense of feeling like they're going to be it's going to be like really compromising their social connections in a way that could even be long term, and they'll feel so vulnerable. So process their feelings, try to find other things to do, and they're going to introduce other things. What could they introduce that becomes like an incentive for them? Not it feels like punishment. If anything but using their social media is going to feel like punishment, what would feel like the next thing that's less like punishment, or less disappointing, and something that they might actually enjoy? And then create incentives, and then you can if it becomes something that is so important to them, and there's other things that you want to see them do, create win-wins, have them earn that in a way that it's that's a reasonable incentive for them to be able to feel like they've got skin in the game.
And I think also giving a reason why, kind of our tone and our approach with our kids, and not having it be an angry thing, like, because, kind of thing like, gee, you've been on it for a long time. Let's get your head to rest, and things like, come eat with me. Come on, let's have a snack. Let's take a break a different way. But I'm with John that sometimes they do need to connect, and we don't want to take it away completely, and to have some balance with it, and calm approach. There we go.
I like somebody that threw in a question about asking what they're watching on Netflix. See, that's different. That's good. That's like not asking about college. That's right. Engaging. You get a sense of what's interesting to them. Very cool.
So, so not everybody can see the chat, so I'm just going to add this comment that was added. We as a community should come up with a limit on phones. I ask them to come home and put phones on the counter and get their homework done first, but it's a constant battle. Not sure how much the time limit should be.
Yeah, that's
well. Here's the thing that's a simple one. So there's a lot of frustration with parents that I talk to that want to have like a family meal, which is engaging, and get home and have some like kind of process their day. Lead by example. If you're asking your kid to put their phone away, you put your phone away as well, and be willing to deliver on what you're asking your child to do, to show that you can be present as well.
Great. Other questions while we have this brain trust here? More comments on the social media concern. It's also hard for kids to start homework immediately after 7.5 hours of doing work. It's finally their chance to connect and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think kids need a break. They are I'm there at the school, they are carrying that backpack since whatever time it is, 6:30, 7:30 we start, right? From 7:30 to 3, and sometimes often to 2:30, I'm sorry. And then going to other commitments, and they're just so darn tired when they get home, and they need to rest, and they need to recuperate, and they need to unwind. So I think we need to give them that, as I was mentioning before, physical and emotional space to kind of relax, you know? And I guess I know the thought of them going on the phone right away is like, oh gosh, but maybe they just need to do that for a little bit, like a half an hour or something, or 20 minutes or 15 or whatever you feel you and your partner are comfortable with. But I just think they have so many demands all day that they need a little freedom when they get back. That's my
Agreed.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see, hold on. I'm just trying to track things here. Um, can you say more about setting boundaries and consequences, thinking of phone use as well as and video game?
I think the important piece here is having a conversation with dignity and respect with your child as a young adult to ask them what they think is reasonable and then have that be the starting point. Ask them what they need, as was said, their need to process their day when they get home and they need to get on it for a while. Well, what do they think is reasonable? And then have them again have a stake in the outcome and you have them be able to make more of a commitment because they feel like they have a voice in the conversation. And again, it may start out where they say 10 hours a day and you're like with 1 hour. So you don't want to like get distracted by the fact that they may be on a very different page than you, and then react to that, or again become really too rigid or about pushing back. Try to see it more as an opportunity to find out, have them be able to defend their argument of how that is so important and what does that do for them, because you are trying to understand what are they doing in their life to reduce stress. So a lot of these things that we're talking about now, like the phone and social media, by the way, are the stress releases for the kids. So you setting too many firm boundaries around it, you're now the stressor, and you didn't mean to be. You think, oh, I'm going to let them have more time to do their work, but if it's causing them undue stress, it's not going to achieve that aim. So again, reasonableness is basing it on your kids' performance. Like, okay, they could do 3 hours social media, 4 hours social media. Are they getting their work done? Are they staying connected with friends? Are they staying healthy? Do they have good routines? Some kids can pull that off. Other kids, each kid may have a different kind of need, and some kids really have a hard time with being able to contain their own behavior, and they're crying out for a parent to be able to contain their time and set some boundaries that are firmer. So each kid needs something different. So don't have this like cookie cutter approach or blanket approach to all the kids, because that's another way to really get kids upset, is when you set a limit for your 17-year-old. It's the same limit for your 13-year-old. Somebody's feeling like they're getting away with something, and the other one feels like it's unreasonable because of their age. So kind of recognize that sibling order as well, and some of the differences in earned privileges, but recognize also that each of your kid has, some kids are self-starters and you just want to get out of their way. And other kids do need a lot more guidance. And those are the kids that you might need firmer boundaries, but keep checking in and letting them know where you're coming from. And is it helpful? Is this what I'm doing helpful? But look at being results driven. Because if kids saying it's being helpful and you're coming up with a reasonable outcome of them getting their work done or having a certain grade, and that's not happening, then it opens up another conversation. It's saying, I thought I was helpful. I'm not really feeling like our plan that we had was as successful as we thought for this week. So what do we need to do? Sweeten the pot with an incentive, pull back a little bit on some of these privileges, and then again, it opens up this ongoing dialogue of humility. You don't have all the answers, and the answers for last week may be different for the answers for next week if the person is under a different level of stress.
Great. So a little bit of a veering topic here. We want to model appropriate behavior. So how do we talk to our kids about our own drinking, and when do we start?
Wow, it's a powerful question, right? Meaning their past, is that what they mean? Or you don't know? We're not sure.
Maybe help clarification.
Okay. So.
But I think that is a question, sort of
past, yeah.
If your kids are sort of, if they come to you with the question of, oh, well, did you drink in high school, or whatever it is, sort of, how do you respond to that? If the answer is yes, and you're still trying, but you're wanting to sort of send the message of waiting and
You know,
delay.
I'm so interested to hear what John has to say. I think there's kind of two schools of thought. I'm all about being honest and upfront. I think that they don't need to know war stories of people's drinking from the past. I'll never forget, I heard a speaker once say they really don't want to know. I never forgot that, because it's kind of a tough one with we professionals. I think if someone struggled and it took them down a not so great path and they want to share that with their kids, that's honest and that's helpful. I think it's different to say like, I did this, that, and the other thing, and I turned out okay, because we don't know how a substance is going to affect. John was so big on that a couple of times, how it's going to affect someone's mind, body, and spirit, right? Their performance, their genetics, and all that. So I would be honest, and I think it depends on the situation, and it's okay to share some details, but not making sure that it's to benefit the kid and benefit a prevention talk. What do you think, John? I look to you.
No, I agree. I have a bias, and my bias is always like, how honest a relationship do you want to have with your kid?
Right.
Just tell them the truth, and
I'm at peace with that.
it's process over content, and again, to Joyce's point, it doesn't mean tell them war stories and
Right.
romanticize it, but
Right.
tell them, the good, the bad, the ugly, lessons learned. That it was a different time, and at the same time, we didn't even know the impact on the brain that we do now. But we made the best choice available at the time, and you could talk about some of the stupidest things you did when when you did drink, if you did drink, because that kids find that so refreshing to hear their parents' humanness. Again, it goes back to they see you successful in Darien today. They want to know you were an idiot in high school. It's so refreshing to find out that you made some bonehead choices. The more bonehead choices you made, the more kids will be able to relate to you today and feel like, wow, I got to see my dad's humanness, my mom's humanness. The more you show your humanness, the more you're lovable. Too many times parents feel like, oh, I can't tell them all the things I did in high school and all. And again, it's like they see who you are today, and then it's just a disconnect. But if they see that you struggled and you were an idiot in high school too, at times, not always, it might be a gross generalization, but you made decisions that you were embarrassed about today. It's refreshing. It's like, oh my God, it gives me hope. Gives me hope that my parents can relate to my struggles today, but it also gives me hope that I might get my act together and live in Darien one day.
Great. Now we have a question that I would imagine is probably of interest and concern to a lot of Darien parents. How do you divert kids away from bad behavior like drinking when the bad behavior is tied to their passions, like sports teams having partying and there is peer pressure to participate?
Well,
I think in
I would,
Darien,
it's a good,
especially the sports culture.
yeah, yeah. I would, first I would start by saying it's not bad behavior. I would not qualify behavior in categories of good behavior and bad behavior. We want our kids to have life experiences. We want our kids to take risks so they can learn about themselves and hopefully learn from those risks. So you can't all of a sudden qualify. We'll take this risk, but not that risk. Take this risk, but not that risk. So it's not bad behavior. Last thing we want to do is, be pejorative, shame our kids from having what they might think. And again, looking at the Darien study by 12th grade, at least half of these kids are feeling like it's a normalized experience. The last thing they need to do is feel some deep sense of shame that they're bad kids because of drinking. The drinking's been around in civilization for a long time. It's not bad behavior. It's reasonable behavior for an adolescent. It doesn't mean that can't be destructive and unhealthy and bad things can't happen. But that's where I would shift away from seeing it as something that is going to all of a sudden be marginalized as something that you'll never understand, that this is a reasonable decision for your kid. So it's just going to have your kid shut down, or at least 50% of the 12th graders are going to shut down from having a conversation with their parent if they think they're being bad. So again, but to the sports, we have some compelling data that shows that team sports is one of the greatest predictors for college binge drinking, because unless they're playing Division I ball in college, they're going to have a loss in confidence, a loss of community and connection, a lot of time on their hands. So it's really important to check in with kids to see, in a sense, how their sport is working for them and how it's not, and how all their choices have consequences. And, what are the good, bad, and ugly of being part of a sport in Darien, What is it going to mean if they move on to college and they're not part of that sport? What have they learned and how has it helped them build community? But, how has there been some high risk involved in building that community with a team if it involves some, heavy drinking?
Can I jump in for 2 seconds?
Please.
I promise I won't do 17 things. I want to happily say that I've worked with kids that are on sports teams that don't drink. Some of them are in Blue Wave Council, and some of them have gotten maybe in trouble for experimenting, but don't make a habit of it, even though others are doing shots and doing different things. I think it's a personal decision. There is a heavy pull, with not just the sports teams, it could be some other peer groups, but there can be a very heavy pull. But if that kid feels comfortable and confident and has made a personal choice, I am not going to drink. I am not going to get high because I want to take care of my body. I want to do cross country well. I want to get into, I don't mean just to be in the college thing, but I have a dream of going to a college that I have a specialty and a love for, or I want to get a great job and be an entrepreneur, whatever it is. If a kid personally has made that decision and parents are at home nurturing it, they can still be on a sport and survive. I've watched it. I've seen it. It's not easy. And they might have to make some choices not to attend certain things. But one of my questions in my assessment or when I'm working with kids is, will your friends still love you and hang with you if you choose not to drink or you choose not to get high anymore? I rarely hear a kid say to me, "Oh my God, no, they'll never take me back," So just some food for thought, some hope.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would encourage for kids and their parents to encourage them is, find a multitude of reward systems and dopamine kicks, in the sport and having a good win and being with your team. That's a reward. That's like, the going out and then celebrating, and that's where kids kind of learn the sense of drinking and, it builds the community and it builds a kind of, that sense of social connection. So it has a reinforcing effect, for connection. They need to find other ways to find that connection as well.
Great. So I'm going to share one really positive comment that somebody added. Last night we had an impromptu 25-minute game night, and our teen girls opened up and talked more than they played cards. They shared about their day, and we had lots of laughs. It surprised my husband and I, and we all decided to make it a weekly thing. Just a 20 to 30-minute easy commitment, phone-free, stress-free, joyful family time. So
beautiful.
I think to all of the points that John and Joyce have been making tonight.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Any last questions before we wrap up? Okay. I don't see anything scrolling. Joyce and John, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for everybody who is here tonight. And we will be following up with an email with the recording of this in case you want to watch it again or share it with others. And we'll also include a link to a parent handbook that has some guidance about talking with students about alcohol and some additional resources. So thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah. Thank you, Susannah. Thank you, Sarah.
Yay,
Thanks, Joyce.
Thriving Youth. Yay, John.
Yeah. You guys
DHS.
you're doing great work.